Today I want to talk about anger and how anger relates to the issue of gender-based violence. Oftentimes, when an abuser commits an abusive act, they hurt someone in some way, we consider it to just be a problem of them not being able to deal with anger. We say, oh, that person was just so angry, he lashed out. We really need to get that anger problem fixed. Is anger really the issue, though? The difference between anger, someone who might need anger management classes, for example, and abusive behavior, someone who is a domestic abuser who needs abuse counseling, is very stark. Abuse is defined as actions that are meant to coerce and control the other person. So they are limiting the other person's freedom through financial means, possibly by physical means, by battering them, and also by potentially emotional means, controlling who they can be around, how they think about themselves, lowering their self-esteem. Meanwhile, anger management is simply an issue of skills. Someone who doesn't know how to control their anger suffers from distorted thinking. They don't understand the emotions that they're feeling. Maybe they're feeling something deeper like grief, sadness, loneliness, depression, and they're expressing it through anger. So anger is often a mismanagement of one's feelings and a misidentification of those feelings. So anger is changed by learning coping skills, learning how when those feelings of anger come up, to not express them through violence, but to instead learn to process those emotions and express them in a productive way. Abuse, on the other hand, is treated by helping the person understand their behaviors of control and understand and empathize with their partner and change those behaviors over time. And it's not always something that is easy to treat. Often these can go hand in hand, but the issue becomes when a person who is an abuser, who is committing acts of violence against someone else, is sent to an anger management class. This can be an issue because not only does it teach them skills from the anger management class that then help them redirect their abusive behavior in a way that may not be as obvious as physical violence, but maybe it's emotional violence now, maybe it's financial violence now. It also serves as a justification for the man's behavior that helps to put society, judges, the court system, to put their fears at ease. It says, oh, the abuser is now getting anger management classes, and therefore they must be okay. We've done all we can do to solve this issue. When in fact, that is an excuse that abusers often use themselves. They say, oh, well, I'm going to anger management classes. My problem must be anger. It must not be abuse. It must not be violence. So all of these are issues that with the disidentification of someone's issue as being abusive versus being an issue of anger. The other thing to think about here is that often abusers use their anger in ways that are not actually explosive and uncontrolled. People who need anger management classes or need help in the anger management category often think of their anger as something that they just can't control, whereas abusers may blame their actions on uncontrolled anger, but may in fact use their anger in a very targeted, very violent way. For example, only battering their partner in places that are not visible when they have clothes on. Or, for example, using emotional abuse instead of physical abuse simply because that way it cannot be as identified by other people. So this is another way that abusers can use the term of anger as an excuse to kind of wash over the actual behavior that they're exhibiting. The last thing that I want to talk about in relation to this idea of anger management and abuse and violence is that, we often think of in society this excuse of, oh, they're just being violent, they can't control their anger, and therefore they're unleashing it in a violent way. Well, that idea comes around often because of the way that we think of men being able to control their emotions. Men are the perpetrators of most of the violence, most of the gender-based violence that's out there. And although they don't commit all of it, men are one of the primary issues. And as a society, we often think of men as not being able to control their emotions adequately. Men and boys growing up don't have adequate role models of men who can control their emotions, both in the media or in even their own families. And so it's very easy for a boy growing up to not have clear role models, not have an idea of what it means to effectively name and manage your emotion, to self-soothe. And so they grow up becoming socialized to the idea that the best way to express their emotion is through anger. And the way that you express anger is through explosive means like yelling, screaming, and of course, violence, especially physical violence, punching a wall, taking it out aggressively on other people in sporting events, or translating that off the field, getting into fights. So this is something that's become normalized in our culture. And the way to combat that is to start creating a different paradigm for boys when they're young, teaching social emotional learning techniques in schools so that boys can learn to identify their emotions, soothe their anger, and learn different ways of approaching this really potentially dangerous topic. Another way is through families, teaching as a father or a mother, teaching boys to learn to label their emotions, and when they start to express themselves in an angry way, teaching that anger doesn't have to be violent. It can be expressed in other forms, and giving them good, healthy outlets through which to express that anger. So remember, domestic violence, violence against women, gender-based violence, all of these are very different than the issue of anger and anger management itself. They are related and can overlap, but the abusive behaviors that we often see exhibited and excused by the idea of not being able to manage anger are very different. Thank you very much.